Hi, I'm Dean Bushmiller with Expanding Security, and this is Risk Management Principles and Practices. Use or consumption of this material by AI is expressly forbidden. Let's get started. When we look at risk management and we drill into it, I've been doing a series of topics on this. We're talking principles and practices, but you'll notice that there are 7 other different videos talking about this. So if you don't get everything that you want out of risk management here, I think you can look at the framework and requirements and the models and the frameworks themselves. That'll probably flesh out a little bit more for you. So this is a little bit high level at this point, but we will dig into how risk management gets done. When I'm doing risk management for my organization, do I do it the same way that you do? And if I do, what are the consequences of that? I mean, what we get is if I do risk management like you do, we get a repeatability there. That's kind of good. But also, if we do it exactly the same way, we do all of our risk management activities the same way, then we create an attack surface that's predictable by our adversaries, which they may abuse. If we all patch on Patch Tuesday and we know that we're not going to patch until Patch Tuesday, then our adversary could, in theory, attack us on Monday if they have a 0-day exploit for that particular patch. So what we want to do is we want to do enough of this similarly so that internally we can maintain communications in our organization. So if somebody comes in from another organization and they're part of our organization, we can say risk assessment and they know what that means. We also want to be able to do this externally to communicate relevant information to the stakeholders that are out there. But we need to do some of this differently. What that will do is that will gain us business value over our competitors, and we want to make sure that it fits what we're doing, but we also want to be a little bit unpredictable to your particular adversaries that are out there. This is a framework that we're creating a framework here. When we're talking about principles and practices, we're doing governance, action, and culture, and we're including all of the things that we do into, well, all of the things that have been done before. We're going to set these boundaries. We're going to respond to the threats, and we're going to track our progress as we go along. That's kind of the big mistake in risk management, to say, oh, well, those people will just go ahead and patch those things and we don't have to worry about that. What we want to ultimately do is build a resiliency mindset within the organization when it comes to our assets, their threats, their vulnerabilities, and the controls that we're working with across the entire organization, starting from the top and working our way down. We have some good guiding principles for the practitioners that are out there. Don't consider that the practices. So start off with, we want to figure out what our appetite for risk is, maintain that appetite for risk, understand that, and set our tolerance levels internally as the business changes over the weeks, the months, the days, the hours. Because your organization is going to be really high stress at, let's say you're a software development firm, you're really high stress at, the times where you're delivering a new version of your software. So that's going to adjust your business and also the controls that you're going to either tune up or tune down at that point. Somebody's got to be in charge of this. And when we're talking about risk management, we are at the highest levels of the organization. A lot of times, though, it's like, well, you don't want to tell the boss the bad news. We want to foster, as senior leaders, that open communication that's out there. And I hate using the word holistic, but here it really fits. We want to look at the entire organization as it pertains to enterprise risk at that high level. Risk assessments we'll talk about in other discussions. The principles, and the core principles that we're talking about here is that this is integrated into all of the activities, all the decision making and strategic planning. It's a part of what we're doing. It's not some standalone department. Oh, there's the risk management department. No, that does happen in some businesses. Like, for instance, when I talk to my people that are in the banking industry, they have a risk division, but that's mostly about credit risk. That's not about cybersecurity risk management that we're talking about here. We also don't want this to be a once-a-year checklist. I think today we need to be doing continual risk management. So we probably can't even do it on a quarterly basis. We may adjust on a quarterly basis or a monthly basis, but we're always looking at that dashboard that's out there. This needs to be structured across our entire organization so everybody understands it, and it has to be comprehensive. And that means that we're going to have a consistent approach with whatever department that we're working with, and the result is going to be efficient, comparable, and reliable as a risk concept within our organization. This should be customized to us, and that means that it's going to fit our external requirements, our internal context, the goals, and the culture of the organization. It should be inclusive of the stakeholders. Don't confuse stakeholders with stockholders. This is all of the people. Now, of the stakeholders, there will be stockholders in there, but it's inclusive of their knowledge, views, and perceptions. And this usually is internal, reaching all the way up to the board level for our organization. It should ultimately flow as a natural piece of what we do in a dynamic way, and we should update it on a regular basis. Remember, risks are going to change, emerge, and sometimes they're going to disappear. Oh, we're not using those assets anymore. We don't have to worry about that anymore. We need to be able to anticipate, detect, acknowledge, and respond to the dynamic nature of risk within our organization. The humans are going to get involved in this, and we have to be ready for that. That means that we're going to create a behavioral and cultural dynamic influence that's going to influence all the aspects of risk within our organization. If management says this is a good idea and we'll hand it off, we've just lost at that moment in time. If they say this is a good idea, how can I get involved in this? Then we've got what we need here. Now let's talk about the practices. We talked about the principles. The practices are things like governance, and that means that we're going to understand our risk appetite and our tolerance. We're going to set the clear boundaries for acceptable and unacceptable risk. Hey, you can't do that kind of thing because that's going to hurt us. That kind of thing, it'll have rules underneath of it, but it really kind of, from a management standpoint, when I say you can't give out really, really expensive loans to really bad pays that are out there. That makes sense to you, right? You wouldn't want to do that because you're risking the assets of a particular bank. We would never do this because these people don't have any money. It might be that a really clear boundary is if you do not have a job, you cannot get a loan. That kind of makes sense, right? We're going to apply that to cybersecurity risk. If you do not have a patching process for this asset that you want to buy, you cannot implement that particular tool. You're not allowed to even talk about it. If the vendor does not have a patch communication and an incident response process within their organization, you cannot buy that tool from them. There also has to be accountability levels here. I break this into 3. You could break this into many more, but these are the general 3. Risk and compliance functions. That's going to be the oversight function. Somebody's going to come in and say, yes, that's exactly what we wanted to do. No, that's not. They're going to look at it and say, hey, and the next time we're going to adjust it this way. For the business operations people, that's going to be owning and maintaining risk on a day-to-day basis. Your operations people know exactly what to do and say, hey, that's too risky. We really can't do that. Or you know what? We've got to produce right now. We've got to generate more widgets right now. So therefore, we need to pay really close attention to that. Lastly, we have the internal auditors, and this should be some sort of independent assurance of what we've said we're going to do, we're actually going to do. Due diligence versus due care. In governance, the last thing we talk about is policy. This needs to be clear, actionable risk management policies. We understand what we're doing there. The tendency at the senior level is to be vague enough so that you can't be sued for the things that you have stated. That vagueness that gets handed to an attorney, and the attorney says, oh, well, we really can't say that, and we really can't say this. And then they've mangled it, and they've massaged it, and they've made it so that if anybody ever saw that information, they could go, oh, we can't hold them accountable for that. But then when we hand it to the technical people inside, they go, what are you trying to say? We don't understand. So we've got to have a good balance there. Remember, we're at the risk management level, so we can be a little bit vague in some of these things, but that's going to depend upon your organization and the litigiousness of your industry. We're going to meet regulatory expectations and also our internal strategies. Sometimes what we will say is when the auditor comes in and says, you can't do that thing, that represents a risk to payment card industry people, we go, you know what, we're making $1 million a person right now, and if that happens to happen to us or that particular problem happens to us, we're going to write you a check for the fine that you give us, and we're going to write a check to the customer for this one customer that it happens to, but we're going to be making millions and millions of dollars over here, so we're willing to, as long as it's not life safety, we're willing to sacrifice one customer, maybe even give them back their money. In our practices after governance, we need to talk about the general responses that we can have. There are 4 basic responses. We start with avoidance. This business activity is so risky for us, we'll stop doing it. It might be a new line of business, or let's say that we were in a business for a really long period of time and the regulations change so radically that it makes it risky for the entire operation, not just this one division. So what we'll do is we'll say, okay, we're not going to do that. A standard example of that today is you decide that you're going to have a small division. Let's say you work in the US, and you decide you're going to have a small division that purchases and works with European customers. You've got a huge business here and a little bit of business there. And in GDPR fashion, they say, hey, you know what? You have to do all of this stuff for all of these customers. And we go, well, we can't put that control on just those customers unless we're willing to carve off all of that data and put it into that particular area over there and separate out the 2 pieces of our business. Our business is set up so that when we build things and do things inside of our business, that we treat all customers the same. And now these new regulations for this small division out there are costing us too much money. So we go, wait a minute, you know what? We're either going to spin that off, we're going to sell it off, or maybe we just stop doing. And that's exactly what we're talking about here in avoidance. We stop doing the business activity. It's really rare that organizations are willing to give up that piece of business, but sometimes it happens, and I've actually seen it in a couple of businesses. Most of the time, where do we live? We live in controls, and as technologists, we put controls in place. Sometimes that's called mitigations. We could say, hey, you know what? We're not going to put any controls in place. We're going to transfer this or get insurance from a third party. That's a contract to pay. The last one is acceptance and do nothing, and go, well, Dean, we would never do nothing. Well, there's some instances where you'll actually do nothing and say, you know what, we're not going to do anything about this. It's, we're not going to protect ourselves against Martians landing on the building because we're really not worried about that. It's really not in the realm of possibility for us. This happens a lot with natural disaster. If you live in the United States, if you live on the Florida Peninsula, you have to have insurance for hurricanes. You don't have any choice about it. I live in Austin, Texas, and we don't have hurricanes. We have a lot of wind every once in a while, but we just don't have hurricanes. So do we have hurricane insurance? No. Do we do anything about it? No. Do we have a plan or a playbook for hurricanes? No, because we don't need it. But our other division that's down in Florida near Tampa, yeah, they've got a bug out setup that's there. So we can do different things for different parts of our organization. I'm going to talk later on about acceptance for a short period of time while we're trying to implement controls, and we need to consider that there is a residual risk until the control gets put in place. The big practice that is new as of around, we'll go 2020 is when this has really happened, where we have an actual dashboard within our organization. Generally, what they would call that in the old days, if you're looking this up, is monitoring, reviewing, and reporting. It's a dashboard. We're going to have continuous control monitoring. That means that we're going to have testing of our controls, auditing of our controls, and we're going to be reporting into that dashboard. Our last audit failed. Our last test failed for this particular asset. So that as things change, we're updating in real time to the entire organization. We're going to have key risk indicators in there. These are going to be the red, yellow, and green indicators that we see inside of there. These are going to be metrics that signal when risk is changing. And so those meters will go, those riskometers will go up and down inside of there. We'll talk about dashboards later. Now, finally is the risk reporting. Generally, if you're looking at the dashboard on a regular basis, you don't have to worry about reading a report. But when we give that dashboard, do we give the entire dashboard to every single person? No. Senior leadership gets the riskometer, and that's all they see. Operations people will see the riskometer broken down for each one of their particular pieces in their divisions that they have control over. And then at the lowest level, somebody will be looking at the riskometer for their particular asset. And we'll set up controls where they can go into that dashboard and say, I want more security, I want less security, and be able to dial the knobs in on our dashboard. Next is communications. If we've monitored this thing, what are we going to do? Normally we'd say, well, they're looking at the dashboard, we don't have to worry about it. No. What happens when something outside of our normal principles happens to us? Well, now we need to reach out to those stakeholders, engage them and say, hey, look, we need to talk about a special situation that's going on here, and how would you like to address this situation? That means each person at each level is going to understand those controls that are in place and why they're actually in place. You know what? It's really risky right now because Patch Tuesday is coming up. So what we do is we turn on lots and lots of auditing, and we also slow down, let's say we slow down transaction values so that we can inspect each one of the individual transactions out there. So at this particular time, it's so risky to just take every transaction that's coming through. We actually slow down the transactions so we can do more inspection. And they go, but we're losing money. It's no, we're not capturing money as fast as we can. Demand will go back up, but it's just on a transaction basis. Also in communication, when there's problems, we do crisis planning, and that should be some sort of pre-approved playbook. It could be that in my environment, I say, well, I don't have any hurricanes here. I have them in my division in Tampa. So you know what? We know that we have a pre-approved plan for hurricanes in Tampa, and we're actually having a problem here where we're at the end of Tornado Alley in Austin, Texas. So we'll take that pre-approved plan for bugging out from Tampa and we'll adjust it so that we don't have to worry about flooding, because tornadoes versus hurricanes, tornadoes are wind and hurricane is wind and water, if we will. So we can adjust those crisis planning notebooks, those playbooks for ourselves. We want this to be a part of the culture of the organization. I hate saying holistic. I didn't really like that word, and I really don't like the word culture, but it resonates well with some organizations today. So we'll embed culture. That starts with tone, by leadership demonstrating risk management is a priority to them. They need to be seen doing those things. If they go, oh, well, this doesn't pertain to me, I don't have to worry about these things, then nobody else is going to follow at that point. We need to be able to, at a lower level, speak truth to power. That means that when we have mistakes and near misses or systemic vulnerabilities, we need to report them up and say, hey, this could cause us problems long term. This is really risky for some low-level employees to do the reporting, so we need to have a good chain of command. It can't be the lowest level person talking to the highest level person. It needs to flow, but that chain of command also can't be in fear, so we got to look for that. What we could do is we could do what's called incentive alignment. We can ensure that performance bonuses that we're giving are correct for things, but any kind of risky behavior attached to those performance bonuses will not compromise the long-term viability of the organization. This actually happened in the United States to a bank where they said, hey, you know what? Every salesperson that creates a new account within our organization is going to get a bonus of this. And so what the salespeople did is they went out and made lots and lots of accounts, and they made lots of they weren't really fake accounts, but they pushed them on customers that had already had an account. So they created new accounts for somebody who didn't even want one. That was risky behavior, but it wasn't illegal behavior until it got to a certain level within that organization. So we have to say that if there's a risky behavior, it's not going to compromise the long-term viability of this organization. So that's where the incentive alignments come in. What is our goal here? What are we trying to achieve? Well, I think what we're trying to do is build a risk management program. And that should be your goal but that should be at the highest level. If you're not a senior person in the organization, take this presentation and give it to the people within your organization and see if it resonates well with them. How is risk management interacting with AI these days? The first is risk management changing AI? Sort of. What's happened is we've got a lot of guardrails that are coming into place. As of 2026, the guardrail innovation is happening, and the risk management function is a stabilizing mechanism for the deployment of a lot of the AI that's happening today. The accountability is actually shifting to the owners. What's happening now is we've said, you know what? We've got enough AI out there. It's stable enough at this point that you should understand, owners, how this, wait a minute, it says they still don't understand. Yeah, that's the problem that we're having right now. People don't understand how they're implementing, not as owners of particular silos, how they're implementing particular AI functions like prompts or tools or agents. They don't know how they're impacting their risk right now. So the accountability is starting to shift toward them, and the lack of understanding and training hasn't caught up with that. So if you're in that position, you go, whoa, 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 we need to slow down a little bit. I need to learn. Or we can't slow down. Okay, I got to take a week off and I got to go learn AI. I got to learn how it's in our business, and then I got to talk to the developers here. What has changed, what is changing is continuous monitoring. We're going to look for automated triggers that catch the data drift, because there's a lot of what's called silent degradation in AI for long-running terminals. So we have to be careful about that. Is this working with our harmonization for regulatory agencies? It's starting to flow in the European Union's AI Act. We're not seeing a cohesive single entity as far as the United States is concerned. NIST has come out with some good ideas here, but there's not regulatory harmony for all the different regulatory agencies that are out there. From a threat vector standpoint, I only wanted to point out 3 examples here. When we talk about data poisoning, if you hear that as a problem that we're running into, the data that we're taking in from our risk management systems and we're pouring it into AI, adversaries are actually poisoning that data. They're corrupting the input to those AI systems. This usually happens with prompts or RAG consuming something inappropriate. We could also look at model inversion. For model inversion, what I say, that's really close to what we've been doing for a long time, which is called blind injection. So corruption of input and blind injection, they've been problems in cybersecurity, and they're just in a little bit different format at this point. The one that is new that we need to deal with from a risk standpoint is what's called hallucinations, and we want to do hallucination containment. So we have a threat, and we also have a control that we can put in place, and that happens by processing your data correctly. What about the impact of AI on risk management? Almost. We're almost there. Okay, so what we're getting that we needed that AI can help us with is we're shifting from reactive to predictive systems that are out there. Usually when we're talking about risk management and risk management data and quantitative data that's out there, we rely on historical loss data that can help us to project into the future. That's not really a good way to do risk assessment. It works well when you're like an insurance company and you're insuring boats and cars and mechanical kinds of things. What we're starting to do is we're starting to get into proactive risk forecasting. Machine learning, what it's capable of doing that we haven't been able to do in the past is ingest millions of data points. As long as those data points remain stable across our particular organization and that we can see these predictable trends inside of there, then that's great for machine learning. But if we're really young and we're not collecting data correctly, this could cause us a real problem. The last thing that we're doing here that is really interesting as of May 2026 is we're starting to do self-red teaming. We're building AIs out there that are actually inside of our organization that are attacking our particular assets so we can define our weaknesses. We used to have to hire a team from the outside to give us this input to our risk assessments. I think this is a really great new tool that we can do. Even in its infancy, it can help us. The problem is that we may inappropriately let this thing take over and actually break production systems. So what I tell people to do is create that virtual environment that mirrors our exact production environment, pull it over here, and then put that red team inside of there and let it go ahead and attack in like a sandbox. I read a lot of things on how AI is supposed to be changing risk management. And I read these things and I dug a little deeper, and my answer is not yet. But I'd really like to see it happen. Not yet. Automating regulatory compliance. This would be great. So because risk management starts off as regulatory compliance and it actually isn't decision support in a lot of organizations because we have to do this particular thing, I really like this idea where some organization from the outside, let's say we have a PCI DSS process. We generate all that data over and over and over again, and we give it to the reporters, and they have to go through it. And individually, they come in, and I don't know if you've had the regulators come in, and they'll go, "Okay, do you do this? Yes. Okay, show me the artifact where that control is. Okay, here's the artifact for that control. Then show me this, and show me this, and show me this. Okay, I've proven that the control that you say is in place, that I tell you has to be in place, is generating outputs, and I can validate those outputs." I think that this is going to sound brutal, that security theater can be eliminated because we can actually take agents from those organizations or take data and give it to those organizations and say, here's this bulk of data. Don't ask us these questions. Let your AI do this. We're not there yet, but I'm really excited for us to get there in the future.